caring for yourself or someone else, please come forward as we sing or as we close the service. And I'll be here in the front, and there'll be those on the sides who would love to pray with you. Let's stand together.
I do want to just interrupt myself for a moment and remind you about the meeting tonight. The congregational meeting will be talking about some issues of great importance to the church. And so if you're available and at all interested in the future and that kind of thing here, this would be a very informative meeting. It's not a vote tonight, it's just an information session and an opportunity to have further conversation and get input from you. So, but anyway, back to the subject. I know that this is a sensitive topic for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, and that really hit me this week. My goal today is really not to address the individual needs that there are. There's people in all different kinds of circumstances related to this topic, but to put a frame around the subject biblically and to help us kind of understand what this is supposed to be about. And I in the past have gone camping from time to time. Most of the time it's backpacking and hiking and camping out in the woods. But I know in a lot of campsites there's a designated area to build a fire. We call it a fire ring. And if you build a fire in the fire ring, it's okay. It provides light, comfort. You can cook on it, a nice ambiance, a little warmth. But if you build a fire just indiscriminately, the potential is there for great destruction. And I always think of this wedding band as a fire ring. And this is where it's safe to build a fire. And within the boundaries of this fire ring, sex is a magnificent, or has the potential to be a magnificent and deeply, profoundly rewarding, satisfying experience. Outside the fire ring, inevitably, it will lead to incalculable and unpredictable destruction. And that's the basic thesis here this morning. Jesus gives us some insight, I think, in the Gospel of Mark about why this is. Why God gave us such a wonderful gift and yet put such a tight boundary around it. And so let's look at chapter 10, beginning in verse 2. It says, "Some Pharisees came and tested him by asking, 'Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?' And what did Moses command you?" He replied. And they said, "Moses permitted a man to write a certificate of divorce and send her away." "It was because your hearts were hard that Moses wrote you this law," Jesus replied. "But at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let man not separate." So the two, Jesus said, become one flesh. And referring not simply to the physical act, but he goes on to say, so they are no longer two, but one. And there's a much deeper significance to that there's something that happens, something that's created when a couple has sex that wasn't there before. It's something new. It's a change. It's a new identity that's created in the act of sexual intercourse. It's not just a transaction. It's not just satisfaction of a physical appetite. It's not just the fulfillment of a biological drive. It's the final step in giving ourselves completely to another person. It creates a relational bond that is meant to last till death do us part. And we have been hardwired by God to experience sex in this way. And so it's impossible for the experience of sex to fulfill its designed purpose outside the boundaries of one man, one woman, one lifetime. In Greek thought, the human beings consisted of, oversimplifying probably, but body and soul. And what you did with your soul was one thing, what you did with your body was another, and the two were sort of unrelated. In fact, some Greeks thought the body was evil and the soul was good. And so it didn't matter. You could have as much sex as you wanted. You could be a glutton. It didn't matter. It didn't affect your soul. In the Bible, in Hebrew thinking, biblical thinking, you can't disconnect the body from the soul. They're inextricably intertwined, inseparable. And so that's why when we talked this summer about the fact that some people have an emotional or physiological response when they encounter God, it's no surprise. Because when you touch the soul, you almost inevitably touch the body. And when you touch the body, the reverse is true. You inevitably touch the soul. So you can't have sex and restrict it to simply a physical experience. That's why the only safe place to have sex is in the fire of a marriage. There's a great quote from a book called The Mystery of Marriage, and here the author writes this. He says, "For to be naked with another person is a sort of picture or symbolic demonstration of perfect honesty, perfect trust, perfect giving and commitment. And if the heart is not naked along with the body, then the whole action becomes a lie and a mockery. It becomes an involvement in an absurd and tragic contradiction, the giving of the body but the withholding of the self. Exposure of the body in a personal encounter is like the telling of one's deepest secret. Afterwards, there's no going back, no pretending the secret is still one's own, or that the other does not know. It is, in effect, the very last step in human relations, and therefore never one to be taken lightly. It is not a step that establishes deep intimacy, but one which presupposes it. As a gesture, symbolic of perfect trust and surrender, it requires a setting or structure of perfect surrender in which to take place. It requires the security of the most perfect of reassurances and commitments into which two people can enter, which is none other than the loving contract of marriage." It's a little bit heavy, but the idea, I think, is right on. The act of sexual intercourse is the final step in giving yourself completely to another person. And the only safe place to do that is within the contract, within the covenant of a lifelong relationship with another person that we call marriage. I'm not saying that you can't get pleasure and there are lots of euphoric moments and experiences that you can have outside of the marriage relationship sexually, because you can, but you always will end up reaping a bitter harvest. And the result is always dysfunction, destruction, and death at all levels. And so, I can't understand sometimes why God gave us such a powerful drive and then put such a restriction around it, because it's difficult to manage and it's hard. So maybe someday we'll have the answer to that. But that is what the Bible teaches us. That this is a wonderful gift. It's deeply satisfying, and it's a transcendent experience spiritually, but it's meant to only take place in the context of the fire ring, marriage. Try to remove it from that context and you have a caricature. I like the story of Lawrence of Arabia, who fought with the Arabs in World War I in the Middle East, and he brought some of the Arab sheiks to Paris for some of the peace negotiations. And of course, these were, at the time, Arab sheiks were nomads. They lived in the desert. They rode on camels, and they were fascinated by Paris and the running water in the hotel rooms. I mean, this was just miraculous. And so when they left, they had asked for tools so they could detach the faucets from the bathtub and the sink and take it back with them to the desert where they lived and have running water. And they didn't realize that, the faucet only worked if it was attached to the infrastructure which supplied the water. And so it is with sex. It really only delivers what we're looking for if it's connected to the infrastructure of a relationship in a marriage. Otherwise, it's something else. It's a souvenir, it's a conversation piece or something, but it's not going to provide the water. And so our sexual relationship with our spouse is meant to be the final expression of self-giving, transparency, and commitment. A little step, is taken when a child is born. We talk about the importance of touch in childbirth. When a child is young, infant, and the bonding that takes place. So we talk about bonding and dating, and how when you start dating somebody, the touches mean different things. A hand on the shoulder, one thing. It's a bond. Not a very personal bond, and then it's like holding hands, and the bond gets a little different, a little stronger. Touching of the face is the next step. Kissing on the lips, and the more intimate the touch, the deeper the bond becomes. And that's why in the Bible, when it talks about a man and a woman having sex, it says that, and he knew his wife, and she knew her husband. There's something that happens at a spiritual level in a person's heart and life and soul that's inescapable. So, this is the final step in giving yourself completely to another person. That's why the only safe place to build the fire is in the fire. So, to address the question of, okay, how can our experience of sex and marriage become more fulfilling? And I like the story about the guy that was in the park one day, and he sees an attractive young woman sitting on a park bench, and he goes over and sits down beside her, and she's reading a book called On Human Sexuality. And she finally puts the book down. She looks over at him and says, "This is a fascinating book. This book says that among men, the greatest lovers in the world are American Indians and Poles. And my name is Joe." And he says, "My name is Flying Cloud Kowalski." We all like to think of ourselves as great lovers. Flying Cloud Kowalskis.
But the reality is that we fall far short of the ideal that the Bible pictures for us as far as our sex life in marriage. And because this is G-rated today, I'm going to make a few suggestions that are sort of generic, and I think, though, they may be the most important things to say about improving the experience of marriage in terms of our sexual relationship with our spouses. And the first thing I would say is it's very important to practice godly disciplines, to live by godly standards. And if we are indulging ourselves in sexual fantasies, if we're ingesting a steady appetite of pornography, if we're involved in flirtatious relationships outside of marriage, if we're involved in an affair, that will definitely throw the water on the fire that's supposed to be there inside the fire ring of marriage. And no husband or wife can compete with the airbrushed fantasies that other people have created for us, or that we create for ourselves as we project what we want onto the life of another person. And so you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Paul says that whatever things are good and worthy of praise, whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, or honorable, think on these things. And so the battle for a